Welcome back to another episode of Trading Secrets. Today we are joined by entrepreneur and reality TV personality known for her role on Bravo's Southern Charm and Southern Hospitality, Leva Bonaparte. Leva has been a part of the hit reality show based out of Charleston, South Carolina, in a guest capacity for 6 seasons, and as of late, a main cast member for 3 seasons now. However, outside her role on the show, Leva has been an integral part of the booming Charleston economy for the past 20 years. Leva and her husband own 5 of the hottest restaurants and bars on King Street. I still need to visit in the heart of Charleston, South Carolina. And Leva's entrepreneurial success with her restaurants and bars even generated the idea for Bravo to create the spin-off series, Southern Hospitality, which follows Leva and her staff of Charleston nightclub individuals, cast members, and patrons of Republic Garden and Lounge. She has now earned the stripes by even being compared to Lisa Vanderpump. All those things, and even has an EP title. Today, we are going to talk all things. How Leva balances the responsibilities of managing several restaurants, continuing to play her role on reality TV, is a creator, entrepreneur, business owner, all the things with a family on screen and off. Leva, I don't know how you do it all, but thank you for being here with Trading Secrets.
Thanks for having me. I love that intro.
Yeah,
I
well,
sound amazing.
shit, you got a lot going on. You got a lot going
I
on.
do. I do.
So much. I got to give my money mafia
I do.
background information here. We got 30 minutes here, so I'm going full speed money mafia. So here
Yeah.
we I think to start it off, Lev, as you think about everything that you've accomplished and where you are today, the best thing to do is to kind of see, like, to find the secrets of how you got there, to root from where it all came. So I read that parents Canadian, you came from Canada,
hmm
and I heard
hmm
that they had a huge a multinational software company, and that
Yeah.
you sold this software for 10 years from 99 to 2009. So just as far
Yeah.
as like career track, compensation, monetization, how well did you do within a role like that? And did it give you a solid base to make moves into ventures like a high risk play of a restaurant?
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, I was Canadian. I really wanted to get to the US because that's a whole different market. And it's funny, I wanted to come down here for real estate because real estate in the US is so different than Canada. I wanted to get into the flipping business and I was kind of using my dad to get here. I was like, I'll run that office, get me in there. So yeah, I was doing project management. Obviously, wasn't my passion. That's my family business. I wasn't making a ton of money like on salary, but I was helping my family build the business up. So essentially, that was not a huge. I didn't really care. I mean, it's we were building it together. But yeah, I started to use some. I always live like way beneath my means. I'm not the typical girl, like, and I shouldn't say that. That sounds really like not nice. I really am not like, I was always say, like, if I dated guys, they'd be like, do you want a purse? I'm like, no, save 3 birthdays and get me a down payment on land. Like, that's just how I've always been. I was not, don't get me wrong, I have some nice things, but I've learned that from my dad. I had immigrant parents who, my dad never leveraged. He always used his own money. He was like, keeping his nuts sort of like a squirrel, like waiting. He would, when the first crash happened, my dad was like, the world goes on clearance. You just have to be ready. Right. So he just like would put his nuts away. And I learned that from him, I think that's how we got through COVID with the restaurant business, was just really running a really like skeleton shop. Like I'm not, we're not the coolest kids, but we're about our numbers, right? So at the end of the day, like if things don't make sense, then we have to scale back. And that's sort of how I got here. I saved up some nuts and I did a little flip. I learned a little bit about that. That's how I met my husband, who's also doing real estate development, doing, flips and commercial. I didn't know that much about it because, again, so different than Canada. That's like how we had our first date, really, was
I
me
got
sort of trying to
two
learn
follow-up.
about that.
Okay, two follow-ups. You
Yeah.
said one thing
Yeah.
you said is in Canada, the flip is different. The whole real estate market's different than the States. For us back home that are listening right now that just don't understand what the differences are, what are the main differences?
I mean, I definitely would say when I was there, there wasn't that sort of, the flipping business wasn't,
Prevalent.
the return on investment wasn't the same, right? And then again, as you know, you're not Canadian, are you?
No, I grew up Buffalo, but that's, you know,
Okay, okay. I for some reason I thought someone in your sphere was Canadian. I listened to
yeah,
some
my
podcasts and
my ex was Canadian.
okay, okay.
We spent a lot of time up there and stuff.
Okay, yeah. So, and also in Canada, you don't really write off your mortgage, right? So there's like a lot of different tax differences. And I just wanted to learn the market here. I wanted to learn, the market in Charleston, and they're definitely, flipping was a thing here. Like real estate development was a thing here, and unless you were doing it big in Canada, it was like I make a little 20 grand here. Like it was like, is this even worth it? So
What
return on investment in the U.S. whole different ballgame.
Okay, so then you make your big first. Now we talk money, we talk dollars here. Can you share what kind of return you made to get the capital to get moving in the restaurant club industry?
Oh, it was so, I mean, no, that was like my first flip was like tiny. I bought like $110,000 house downtown Charleston, end up flipping it for 420. Put 100 and something in it, 150 in it. It wasn't a tremendous amount, but I kept moving that. I bought a property, actually at the time we were dating, me and my husband bought a property downtown that now is a short-term rental that makes a killing for like nothing. So it was just like sort of putting our nuts away, both me and my husband. Also, in the beginning, we had investors. We had investors that backed us. We just bought them out the first year.
Gotcha. Okay, so
Yeah.
I was going to ask you that because I looked this morning. The restaurant failure rate, according to the National Restaurant Association, estimates about 30% of restaurants will not make it within 1 year. That's great. We're not talking lifetime. We're talking 1 year, 30%
Yeah.
failure rate. So when
Yeah.
you guys came together to say, hey, we're going to take the money that we've earned and built through flipping and software sales, and we're going to throw it all in the restaurant and club industry. My question to you is,
Hmm.
how much of your own capital did you put in? Then if you raise capital, how much did you guys raise?
Um, a lot. We raised like a lot, like seven digits, quite a bit, you know what I mean, just to dump into the property. And it took about, um, you know, uh, almost like 2 years to build out, just because Charleston's so tricky.
Yeah.
So, just floating the project, but we dumped like low, seven digits just into the renovation. So it was quite a bit. And to say we put everything in it, like we didn't even have a wedding. We went and got married on a Tuesday in a park. I was wearing a $60 dress, didn't have a ring. I think my ring was just like a little Costco ring. Like we put everything in it. So
You went
I'm
all
talking
in.
like
Sure. This was your life was
all
tied
in.
to restaurants and bars.
All in, yeah. We were just like, fuck it. Like all in. We're gonna do this shit. Like, what do I need to serve a bunch of people dinner for? What I do want to say, like, I think that everything that I did, which I think is the key, and I had so much judgment from friends because, we got married on a Tuesday. I had a lot of bougie friends. I'm Iranian. So like, listen, Persian girls get married, with all the things, the bells, the whistles, the super expensive wedding. I most girls I grew up with were like marrying the doctors and the lawyers and whatever. I'm marrying this like, entrepreneur. So I think everything I did was like I did it for me. I did it the way I wanted to do it. I got a ton of pushback from family, from friends, girlfriends like being judgmental, like, well, what are you doing? What are you thinking? Even when I bought the property with Lamar, like, you're not even married. And I was like, I have a fucking contract. Like, it doesn't matter if I'm married. When you do business with people, do you have to be married to them? No, I have a contract, and we'll like, you should be decent enough that, we're not going to like, it's a little property. It's not a big deal. So everything I did, I got a ton of pushback. And I always say, like, from the day, even from my wedding to moving here, it was like, I really did what Leva wanted to do. Like I couldn't care less. I think I was born with some genetic that's like, I couldn't give a fuck what you think, even if you're my best friend. I'll take it with a grain of salt, definitely park it. You know what I mean? Like I feel like I do have wisdom in my decisions, but I really live for myself. And so I think that every decision I made was probably like looked at as like wild and crazy, but I made it for me. And initially the whole, again, we didn't start in food and bev, we really started in the club business. So we went straight to club.
Okay.
Republic was the club. And that I think alcohol in the club business also is tricky in itself, but the return on booze versus the return on food is like a different ball game. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you said a million unbelievable things there. I think the biggest one that people spend their entire lives trying to accomplish, Leva, is not giving a fuck what people think, right? We live in a
Yeah,
world now where it's pretty much forced down our throat to like care what people think. As soon as we,
totally.
even if we've like totally instilled that ability, well, through social media and everything else, it's just keeping up with the Joneses and it's hard to get away from it. So to have that from day one is a huge differentiating skill, because I think most people their entire lives fight internally to get that, but you got it. Now, here's the thing. We had Mark Laurie on. So Mark is a multi-billionaire, owns the Timberwolves with A-Rod. He had a background with Walmart CEO land. And then we also had this founder of Netflix. Both of them had two completely opposing views. Founder of Netflix says OPM, use other people's money at all costs. Mark Laurie did what you did. He had like $316,000 to his name. He went to investors and said, every single penny I have is in on this business. We won't fail because I can't fail. Otherwise, I'll be literally begging for food on the streets. You took that route. And for all my Southern, my Bravo people, Southern hospitality, we're going to get to it. I'm in the weeds on the business side right now. When you went to say, we're going to put every penny on the line, we know it's seven figures, but how did you get other investors to come in, and how much did they meet you in for?
So when I say seven figures, I think we collected about seven figures from others and then put in the rest ourselves. And it wasn't like a ton of money. It was basically at the end of the day when the real estate market crashed. I forget what year it was. It was,
Oh, eight? Oh, eight, oh,
yeah,
nine?
yeah. We had a bunch of properties and we were like, okay, but not in the best shape. But what we were like, I mean, both Lamar and I we were heavily involved in like philanthropy, and we noticed that like the Boys and Girls Club was closing and like all these places were closing. No one had the funds to sustain any of these sort of places that were important to us. So we started throwing these parties called Party for a Purpose, because we knew no matter what, people are always going to drink. Markets up, markets down, like whatever. People are just always drinking. People still want to get out, right? So we went to some places that just weren't doing well, went up to them and said, listen, do you want us to just throw a party? People go where we want to go. You know what I mean? Like, we just let us have your bar. We're going to let whoever show up at the front collect money. We'll pack your bar. So we did that. And then the bar sales were like insane, like to the point where, you know, there were businesses that weren't doing well, and we'd walk in and their Friday and Saturday, like they were just doing, you know, let's say they were doing like $2,000 on the bar on like a Friday because they're doing poorly. We'd walk in, they're doing 30 grand just at the bar. Right.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden they were, you know, we're like, whoa, they're like, whoa. And then at the front, we would have different nonprofits come to the front and just collect cash. Like, hey, put in $5 or don't, or whatever. And it's called Party for a Purpose. We did it Friday and Saturday at different locations. And then we started to stay at this one place called Fish that wasn't, you know, known for after hours. It was a restaurant, but those hours in the restaurant that are like the killer are like when dinner finishes and then nobody's in there. It's like, there's like 10 people having drinks. So then when their dinner was finished at like 9 p.m. to 2 a.m., they're making killer money, probably more than they were at dinner, because we were packing the place up, and it was good feels. And so eventually we kind of honed this like power. And then a few people come up to us and they were like, why don't you guys just open your own place? We'd never thought about it. And then I was like, you know what, because everywhere we're going, there's not enough room for our parties. And then people were asking us to throw parties. And it was just basically like wherever me and Lamar went, people just kind of followed. And then, you know, it was actually Lamar who had two homeboys that they were like, you know what, fuck it, we'll put a couple hundred in and get it together. And we did it. And then,
How
you know,
long,
we
with Republic, how long did it take you to get a full return on the investment? How many years until you recovered the full investment?
um it was like immediate, like within the first like year or two, we'd recovered. We bought out our investors, and we're not the kind of people that like go to spend. We're gonna buy our investors out. We're gonna, you know, reinvest in the business. That's really how we've done it. Like a lot of people would like up their lifestyle. We didn't. We've continually just reinvested in ourselves, and we've done it for a decade. You know, and
Okay.
a lot of people like don't ride on that. They want to kind of
All right,
do a
let me
lot
ask you
more.
this, because I'm curious about the bar industry on King Street. We know Charleston has just been booming. Let's fast forward to 2024. You had mentioned how you know, shitty bars doing 2K. You guys brought them to 30K.
Yeah.
2024, money's flying everywhere. S&P 500's at all-time highs. Inflation's through the roof. You got the show behind you. You got everything. On
Hmm.
King Street, give me an idea on like a Friday or Saturday. You're the not your bar, but like the worst performing bar on that street versus like one
Hmm.
of the bars. What are you pulling in on a Friday or Saturday?
I
Rough.
mean, we're definitely like the worst bars are doing maybe like, I don't know, 2 grand, 3 grand. Like, a couple people walk in Friday night, it's dead, whatever. But over a weekend, we're gonna hit 6 figures, you know,
Absolutely. And
over Friday, Saturday, depending, and on a slower one, maybe, a little less, but we're hitting big numbers Friday, Saturday.
okay,
So
and then from a cost structure, obviously there's a ton of expenses with running a club and restaurant. How many weekends does it take to like cover the costs in a month based on the performance you guys are having?
I mean,
2 hours.
it's maybe gonna take a weekend.
Okay, so you guys are just absolutely cranking.
Yeah,
That's so cool. I love it.
yeah, yeah.
One thing that I saw, and then I got to get to Bravo stuff because I could talk about this business forever, but it's my understanding that Gen Z, and just in general, the trend is changing where people are consuming less, but they're
Mhm,
consuming more of high quality stuff, like the luxury stuff. I don't know if
mhm.
you've seen that trend in your restaurant. I'm curious if you have. And as a result of that, I have to imagine when you're selling like the 1942 and the Casa Azul and all that, like you're probably getting mad. That's probably where your biggest upside is. So that trend is probably helping the club business, correct?
Yeah, I think it definitely is helping the club business. Back in the day, Republic was like where the expensive drinks were. You know what I mean? Because when we opened, our price point was pretty high. Now that we've opened Bourbon and Bubbles and we've opened Lamar's, it's like it's had to up itself because of the consumer. The consumer wants something better. They want more exclusive stuff. They want access to Pappy. They want, stuff by the glass that not most places will sell. Like we'll have Camus by the glass. Like not a lot of places have that here. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. You'll find a ton of Pappy, like a Bourbon and Bubbles, where people are like, "Oh my God, I've been on a year for, I've been on a list for 40 years trying to get this stuff." So yeah, the exclusive stuff has become, it's like a thing. People are really about their booze and particular about it, and yeah, so we carry a lot more high end stuff. I mean, Republic is sells the most champagne in all of the state of South Carolina, especially in terms of the magnums. So like if you think like people are rolling in buying magnums, and I can't off the top of my head, but they have all these other different names, like the baby toddler one and the
Yeah.
Ebenezer and the whatever. They have all these different names, the big bottles, that people are buying them. And
Let me
they're
ask you
not older
this.
people, like they're college kids coming in there. So it's weird.
Money's coming
uh
from something. Who knows where it's coming from? Two
yeah.
rapid fire questions I'm curious of. What is the most expensive bottle that you've seen sold, and what's the largest tab you've seen?
I mean, obviously there's buyouts, which are different, but I want to say like our largest, I think it would have been, I think we had a $15,000 bottle that we sold
What is that?
for
What is
that
a
size.
$15,000 bottle? What is it? Do you
It
know?
was like a bottle of Veuve, like
Jeez.
not a Magnum, but like a big, the baby toddler one.
Okay, largest buyout you've seen.
Uh, I mean,
Do you
that
want
that'll be like just maybe under, not 6 figure, but like a Friday night buyout. Yeah, like a,
Unbelievable.
yeah.
Congratulations. You're killing it. All right. I got to
Thanks,
transition
thanks.
the Bravo move, right? So I'm sure the numbers that are coming in today for your restaurant are a little different than pre-Bravo days. Was part of the move
Mhm.
to Bravo the exposure? Like, was that the main incentive to get exposure to blow up your existing restaurant portfolio?
So honestly, Jason, it was like funny because we were maxed out. And if you talk to any of the kids, like they'll tell you, we already had the lineups, and like we're at capacity. So there wasn't it wasn't really about getting more people in the door. It was more about opportunities to expand,
Okay.
possibly license, franchise, open more spaces like across the country. That sort of like was where like where my head was at, or possibly open other concepts that would bring people in. So Republic has not done tremendously better than it did years before. I definitely think, again, we don't live in LA or like some of the bigger cities where people sort of flock to where there might be cameras. It's Charleston, so people, it's like the locals are like, I don't know, has cameras there. So it's kind of like we got a little bit more tourism, a little less locals. We're kind of known for having local spots. So I think it's sort of like done a flip. Um, so it's not as though, our numbers have skyrocketed by any means. It's like we fill capacity by whoever gets there, we fill capacity. But I do think that the big reason we did it was really the long game. And right now I'm sitting in year 2 of Southern Hospitality, and we don't really know exactly what that long game will look like. But, I'd like to see myself be able to open some places in other cities where I don't have the connections, where I can't pull a crowd. You know what I mean? Like, I think the biggest thing about restaurant and bar is, can you pull the crowd? You know what I mean? It's not always about the food and what they have to offer and the ambiance. It's really like, you need those kind of key people, like the old school concierges, like the people to kind of pull the right people in. And then you set this like vibe, and then people come in. And that's one thing people don't understand about.
Yeah, we travel, like I travel all the time, right? So I don't know where the hell I'm going, but then I find someone in the city and they know where they're going. And anytime they're like, okay, we're gonna go here, it's followed by this. Yeah, we'll go here. I'm making this up, but Drake was here last week, or we're
Yeah.
going here. All the players will come after the game here. Like that's the thing. No
Right.
one's saying like, great service, great carpet, cool energy.
Exactly. No one's like, I love the lights. They've got a really great linguine. Everyone's like, this is a spot. This
This
is
is
my spot. It's killer. It's like great. It's got the vibe is great. Like everyone's just like, the vibe is great, which ends up being like a little bit of lighting, a little bit of music, a little bit of food and drink, but mostly who is in your building, right? So that's really like what sets the tone. And that's where Lamar and I started to cap out. We had a kid, and it's like, can we physically be in the building? Because the way we started Republic was like mass text, like, hey, we're going here. Hey, we're going there. This is where we're kicking it at. You know what I mean? And so, we started Max Out. I wanted to be home more with my kid. I didn't want to be out Friday and Saturday all the time. And so the long game for the show really is that we can hopefully connect with the right people and be in other cities and sort of be like, hey, do you want to open a Republic in this city? And we haven't figured out how we want it. We are not a franchise, maybe a licensing situation, or open another spot and have key people that we pick, almost like boutique style, to be able to run those spaces the way that we want them run without us needing to be there.
Let me ask you this. You're now EP of Southern Hospitality. Of course, Republic's a huge part of that show. When you look at just you've been on Southern Charm, you've done a ton of businesses, Southern Charm, guest and main character. So we know you're paid episodically or however you're negotiating that, right?
Yeah.
When you become, because this is different, we haven't really had someone on the show like this, maybe other than Rob Dyrdek, but he negotiated his deal with MTV way back when and took him to the house. But anyway, with Southern Hospitality, I'm wondering, is the play more in possibly having like some type of equity within the show, or is the greater value going to be the exposure to your businesses? When you look at it, like, do you have equity in Southern Hospitality, or are you just paid as an EP and cast? Like, how's the business model work?
Hey, we're paid as an EP. And the EP pay is a money play. I mean, some people think like, oh, EP allows you to,
Control stuff like that.
yeah, no, that's not the case. You know what I mean? It's really sort of a money play, because at the end of the day, it's like I definitely think that I would have walked away had I not received the EP, because this wasn't a show that was like created and casted. Like, this was me knowing, for 6, 7, 8 years that I was very strategic in the way that this show came to happen, because they'd offered it to me. Different production companies, backstory, had come and offered shows to me just based on the restaurant. They were like, oh, you guys are so young, how do you own all these places, blah 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 blah. And I kept parking and being like, no, 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 not sure, no. And then at some point I was having fertility issues, and I didn't want to film. I felt too vulnerable to film when we sort of almost moved forward with a show. And then I was like, no, I feel like it's too much stress. Like, I finally, like, my body's taking this baby. I walked away from the deal, and the other party was extremely upset. And it just goes with like going with my gut, which I've always done. And then when Charm came about, it was really not me even attempting to be on Charm. I actually was like thinking because Craig was a little bit involved. In the business, I was trying to get him to sort of be the face of the business. I was like, come on, I don't want to be on TV, but like maybe this could be a play. And when producers came to town, they kept saying to me, why do you keep talking about Craig? And I was like, well, I thought you wanted to know about Craig. They were like, no, we want you on the show. And I was like, but I'm not Southern. Why would you want me on the show? And they were like, but you are Charleston. Like you're Charleston.
You
You
are.
are, yeah. So I went from a place of yes. And in my mind, I was like, this is the soft launch for, it's just like anything in business. Like, am I going to go open a restaurant on a shitty street? No, I'm going to go to the best street, where there's the most amount of traffic, where like I have the best case of like success. So for me, when I went on to Charm, I was like, great. So if I do want to end up doing a show, I can sort of soft launch, bring these viewers onto the next show instead of just like, going in fresh. So
Okay.
that's sort of where my head was at. I'm telling you more than you're asking, but
Oh, that makes perfect sense. I think it makes
I'm
like goes in. There's a lot going on, and I think what's great about you explaining your thought process is it provides so much. I think intention with what you do and how you do it, and it's no coincidence that you have found the success you have. When you look at, so suppose I'm your account. I'm just curious from a business perspective. If I look at your Bravo income, all your Bravo income versus your restaurant income, I'm assuming, and maybe I'm way off, that the restaurant income is blowing the Bravo business model out of the park. Is that
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like hilarious. Yeah,
so?
it's not. Yeah, it's not what I'm doing at Bravo. Like sometimes is what I'm doing on a weekend.
Right.
In my spots. So yeah, it's not. Thus far has not been a huge like money play. But I think that it will be. You know what I mean? I remember like if you look at like Lisa or some of the other people who have the two shows, they've been on TV for quite some time.
Right.
I'm only on third season Charm. You know what I mean? I just got to this the year where you actually get to like negotiate because there's sort of like card first, second, and then like the third year you start to get a little wiggle room where you get to actually make some money. And so remember, I'm in those first few years, so it's not a ton of money, but again, I'm very it's all part of like a bigger thing. People call me calculated. I feel like calculated is a negative word. I'm very intentional on what I do because my time is limited and I want a return on investment, like right down to like a hairstyle. You know what I mean? Like I'm very aware of like, okay, well, this would be the easiest return on investment, like would be this fast hair for this thing. You know what I mean? So I do that with everything. And I try to make sure everything connects and makes sense because I want to do some epic shit, but time is limited. And I also want to be a present mom. And I also don't want to my family to be a concession, my marriage to be a concession, my relationships to be a concession. So I'm very, very intentional. And I like to make sure that I have I always say to the kids sometimes that the cast that I have, I'm like, if I were in your shoes, I would want to make sure that I had every possible thing to make sure that I'm successful. I would have every possible, I would dot every I and cross every T when I move forward with something. You know what I mean?
Great.
Um,
It's great advice. Leva, one of the things you said is that like there's only so much you could do. You've done some epic shit and time is tight. Done some
yeah,
epic shit. I could talk to you hours about that. I do have to get your
yeah.
trade secret before we wrap because I know that you got to get going here. But one thing I got to ask you is just the business of being an executive producer. So you have been now an entrepreneur behind the scenes. You've been in Southern Charm where you are a cast guest. You are now having the eyes in front of the camera and behind the camera. From a business
Mhm.
perspective, financial perspective, any trading secret you can give us as an EP that's looking into the show while on the show that we wouldn't know about the business?
Um, in what sense? Like financially or I mean
Like, are these shows
EP
profitable? Do you have to pay people a ton? Like, when you're an EP, like, what's the business side we just wouldn't be exposed to unless we could talk to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the shows are definitely profitable. I mean, I think that the EP play you can't always get, but I think that if you're in a position where, another Bravo celebrity reached out to me and I was like, you have to also be willing to like own your stuff and be like, I walk away if I don't get NBC's gonna hate me for saying this, but I walk away if I don't get this because I created this. This wasn't casted and created. This is my thing. You know what I mean? And I think that's the biggest thing is like you really have to be able, I always say like negotiating, anybody knows, you got to be able to fucking walk away. You got to be willing to lose it to get it, the way you want it. And I've always been willing to walk away, but also I think people know well enough that I always have skin in the game. I always show up 120%. But, my biggest trading secret also too is just like, like everybody says is, like go with your gut. And sometimes that means, you know, anti-hustle culture, like a little quiet. I have the best, I think like my brilliance lives in quiet. Like when my life's a little slower, when I'm quiet, I'm like, oh shit, this is the move. You know what I mean? You need that. And then the other thing is like, don't ever wait till you're ready. Cause I didn't know the whole EP thing. I didn't know doing the show was totally not my wheelhouse. I wasn't ready, but I went from a place of yes. And I think if you wait till you're ready, you'll never do it. So I think that's like when you're ready is where dreams go to die, because you can't, you can only align enough and then just be like, fuck it, jump,
Yeah,
you
I mean,
know?
I think there's a ton of trading secrets just in this episode. The idea of like, if you're going to do something, go all in, find people that'll back you, even do some type of testing. Like you did some focus group testing, just running a bar from with no expense, no risk, going from 2 to 30K just as a contractor. There's a lot there. I think the idea of being intentional is brilliant. And it's interesting to hear from an executive producer, like even when you're negotiating with some of the cast or working with them, like some people just want it too bad, and wanting it too bad could actually hurt your business and hurt your long game. And then the one thing I'm taking away is cross every T, dot every I, like invest in yourself, your brand, because your brand is walking. But Leva, I could talk to you for another 5 hours. I know you got to get going. We're going to have to do a part 2 at some point because it's
Yeah,
like we
let's do a
just got a
part
little
two.
sprinkle. We just got a little
Yeah.
taste. So many more roots under the surface. But I gotta find if people haven't been like they're interested in to see more of what you have going on. They want to follow you on social media. Where can they find all things?
I mean, right now it's just social media. I wish I had more to offer right now. I'm just so busy bee, but it would just be social media, I guess, on Instagram, Leva
Your
Bonaparte.
Instagram tag. How are they gonna find you?
Yeah. Yeah, Leva Bonaparte, I think is what it is.
There you go. Follow Leva on social media. And in the recap, we will list all the places that she owns, where you could visit them, and everything else that she has going on. And Leva, thank you so much for being on this episode of Trading Secrets.
Thank you. I started listening to your podcast. I actually love it. I love like your fresh take. You're young. You're like so open. So I just wanted to tell you that. You're like
Uh,
on my Spotify now.
that means a lot. When
Yeah.
if you haven't listened to the Will Macris episode, check that one out. Will is who started Zero Bond in New York City. And I think
Yeah.
that's like your
I
next.
started to listen to that. I started to listen to that because Lamar's is a private spot, and I started to listen to what he was doing, and I was like, oh, this is interesting.
They're
Send it to my husband. So
like Super Bowl is a huge Zero Bond. Every play Zero Bond is now.
wow.
Like that's going to be one of your next ventures. But I know you got to get going. So Leva, thank you for being with us.
Sorry, I can't hear you, but